NBN's put out a rather interesting article last few days about how it's planning to do the fibre upgrades in the ACT in Canberra, because most of Canberra, the ACT has got the garbage fibre to the node so-called technology, which is a pile of rubbish. So it looks like they're actually going to use mostly underground to do this. Now the ACT is a bit strange that most of the power poles are actually in people's backyards and not out in the streets. I think it's one of the few areas in Australia that actually does it that way. So it makes it a bit difficult for the NBN to use power poles to do aerial fibre. So it looks like they're actually going to do the bulk of it using underground conduit. But anyway, it goes into details about, what's the extra additional homes that have been done, how many have been done previously with fibre to the prem. So it's actually 40,000. And it goes, as I said, it goes into the detail of how the NBN is actually going to do this. So it lists all the different suburbs in the ACT and the time frame, which is by 2030. And that map's actually quite good because it shows the future FTTP upgrade. Actually, we shouldn't really use the word upgrade because you can't upgrade fibre to the node to fibre to the premise. That's quite misleading. It's actually not an upgrade, it's actually a replacement. You can't upgrade copper wire to fibre. All you can do is actually replace it, and everything in the node, the fibre to the node cabinet, is basically junk. So it's not an upgrade. I think we've got to actually stop saying it, call it out for what it is, which is a replacement program. So then it actually goes into the details of how it's all going to do this survey, construction, after construction, and the rest of it. And then it says, why is the ACT upgrade different? Let's stop calling it upgrade. Let's call it for what it is, replacement. So it's a smart mix of underground and aerial. So this is where it details where you can either use aerial or you can use underground, which is nothing new, but as I said, what's different is it says here around 90% of the FTTN to FTTP network, NBN network upgrade is expected to involve a new underground build. And this is actually one reason why it's a bit expensive. Well, it's not typical of Australia, so we shouldn't use what the cost per premise is as any sort of basis for trying to argue that the multi-technology mix is cheaper, because it never was. In fact, the NBN actually leaked that out back in February 2021, that Labor's original fibre to the premise rollout was actually cheaper by about $10 billion. So that was actually hidden in the strategic review, which is a disgrace. There should actually be a royal commission about that, but I'll save that for another day. So the bulk of the premises will be done with underground conduit, and there might be a few places where it's done using aerial. But so this is actually quite an interesting article. I'll put a link to it in the video, and you can have a look at it, and people in the ACT can see if their suburbs on the list, which should be. But this is going to take a bit of time, basically till the end of the decade, unfortunately. And took the Liberals 10 years to stuff up the NBN. It's going to take Labor and others 10 years plus to fix it all up, do it properly with fibre. So quite an interesting article released by the NBN in the last few days. So have a squiz of it, have a read, and it's quite revealing. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching.